Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Jonathan Kuttner. The big question is, how do you stay calm at the moment? We are living in a storm of information, misinformation. It's kind of pounding in on us. We are being attacked by something we can't see, which may very well kill us or kill one of our, or make us very ill, or one of our family, or someone we love and someone we know. So it's really difficult. And the question is, how do you stay calm so that you can get on with life and cope? Now, what I'd like to share with you is what I have found. And it's actually been a really, really exciting journey. What I have used is an ancient philosophy called Stoicism. And in the past, I knew about it a wee bit, and I had heard people talking about it because it's been around for, a couple of thousand years. But it's only in the last 4 or 5 weeks that I've actually been practicing it. And practicing Stoicism has literally changed my life. I just cannot tell you how astonishing it has been. It's been, I feel really calm. I feel happy. I actually feel happy, and I can only ascribe it to Stoicism. It is, as a child, I used to have the most horrendous temper. I used to kind of just fly off the handle. And then as an adult, I learned to control this in regard to other people. But every now and again, I would actually lose my temper, specifically at me. And if I close my eyes, I can still see my dad, who I loved very much. And I could still see him when he made a mistake. He'd kind of frown and he'd say, "You fool," talking about himself. And I must have taken this on, and I have continued until the last 4 or 5 weeks, where when I do something that I consider to be idiotic, which happens, I will actually just get really angry with myself. And anger is corrosive. Anger doesn't help anyone, and certainly hasn't. Being angry at myself doesn't help me. But since practicing this beautiful and actually simple, and simple doesn't mean easy, but simple means I can explain it to you and you can practice it and find whether that Stoicism will actually change your life in a way that I know for the rest of my life I'm going to practice this. It's quite astonishing. So I actually want to share this with you. In fact, I'm kind of busting to share it with you. And so let's start. So the interesting and fascinating thing is that, we are living in a pandemic right now. If you go back almost 2,000 years, the last great Stoic teacher, the last great Stoic philosopher was a man called Marcus Aurelius, who was the emperor of Rome. And he, most of the time that he was emperor of Rome, which was for, I think, 29 years, a long, long time he was the emperor. Most of that time he was living through a pandemic, and it was actually given his name. It was called the Antonine pandemic, and his name was Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. So his Antonine pandemic was named after him. Now, he was an incredibly unusual guy. He was a philosopher king. So you're very fortunate to come across a philosopher in your life, someone who's wise, but you are many times more fortunate to have your ruler to be a philosopher. And that's what he was, a very wise man. And he practiced, he had learnt about Stoicism. It came from earlier, it came from Greece. And the word stoa means a meeting place, and it's been kind of taken forward to be a porch. It's like a comfortable meeting place where people live. So Stoicism is a philosophy for the people, where people come to congregate together. You can learn Stoicism, and anybody can learn Stoicism. What the Stoics believe is that the stuff that our civilization esteems above everything else, the things that we chase, are actually as nothing. They're not important. And these are things like your health. Your health, like for us, this is an incredibly important thing. The Stoic would say, well, if you've got great health, you could do good things, or you could carry on being a mass murderer. So good health in and of itself is actually not something to aspire to. It's something that if you have it, it's useful so that you can do the real work. And so there's health. What's the other great thing? Wealth. That's what everyone wants to be wealthy. That's what capitalism is all about. Well, again, if you're wealthy, that's nice, but it doesn't mean it's not a good thing in and of itself. There have been studies that have shown that if you earn above a certain amount, which is enough to sort of put food on the table, put a roof over your head, and have a few other things, wealth beyond that doesn't bring you happiness. Very, very wealthy people are not happier than others, because wealth in and of itself has nothing to do with the true qualities that you need to work on. So health and wealth, and the last thing, well, it's not the last thing, but the last important thing is the praise of other people. So if you rise up and you're a pop star, or millions of people adore you for some reason, or you rise up to become the president and you're now a great ruler with huge power, again, that doesn't, in and of itself, that doesn't bring you happiness, and it doesn't make your life actually worth living anymore. If you have health, wealth, and power, then you're fortunate, because now you can start to do the real work of Stoicism. And the real work of Stoicism, there are basically, the one statement they make is that inner virtue is the only good, not outer stuff. Inner virtue is the only good. And what is inner virtue? And there are just 4 fundamental, cardinal virtues that we need to live by. And these are virtues that are inside us. So like Nelson Mandela, who was a prisoner, he was given, at some stage he went to prison, he was angry, he was wronged, and he was really angry. And some stage of his 30 years in jail, he was given, someone sneaked in a book of the Stoics, and he read it and he thought, and he changed to become a man where nothing outside bothered him. It was because he was living according to these 4 cardinal virtues. The first is called natural wisdom. Now, natural wisdom, which is an odd phrase, it's obviously an ancient phrase, but what natural wisdom means is that everything you do needs to be for the greater good of humanity. So if you are going to win something, and you win it at the expense of someone else, so you win, they lose, you win, they become hurt, they become less by it, that's not following this natural wisdom. Whatever you do should help. If it helps you, it also needs to be for the good of humanity. The second, which isn't quite the same, and there's a very important difference, is that it should be just. So in other words, it needs, in the scales, you have a goddess of justice, and in the scales of justness, it needs to be right. So not only for the good of humanity, but it needs to be just. The third is that you need to work on temperance. And that's another funny word. It's an old-fashioned word. And temperance means you need to do it just enough. Not too much, not too little. You need to work out what is, if I'm doing something, saying something, how much is it when it's just correct? I have ordered my action so that it's good for the good of humanity. It's just, and I've done it enough. And the last of the four great pillars is that you need this. You absolutely need this. You need courage. And you need courage to do the first three, to actually often the right thing to do in a situation actually is difficult. You're faced with a moral dilemma. You're nervous about the outcome and so on. And so therefore you need courage. But the courage comes from knowing that what you are doing follows the other three. So these are the four basic pillars of Stoicism. And they are, so therefore you judge everything that you do by these four pillars. And if you do that and you live like that, what the Stoics say is that you will reach a state of authentic happiness, authentic, real happiness, not the kind of happiness that comes from getting a new car and thinking, oh, what a fantastic car. And then 2 months later, you get a scratch and you think, oh my God. And then 4 months later, you think, it's not so good. Look at the new one now. So that kind of happiness is neither here nor there. The happiness that comes from chasing stuff outside you. It's living according to these four seemingly simple, but not quite tough cardinal principles, virtues. Now, what the Stoics then do is that they say, well, here are some helpful hints, but it's more than that. These are some extra rules which will really help you to live by these four cardinal virtues. And the first is sort of embodied in a beautiful prayer that I used to think was by Francis of Assisi, but I'm quite wrong. It was by a man called Neubauer, who was an American evangelical cleric. He was a preacher, and he wrote this beautiful prayer called the Serenity Prayer, which is, Lord, give me the serenity to kind of put up with things that I cannot change. The courage to do the things that I must change, and the wisdom to tell the difference between them. As beautiful, simple prayer, the serenity to put up with stuff that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can and must, and the wisdom to tell the difference between the two. And from a Stoic point of view, they talk about circles of influence. So there is my circle of influence. What can I change? That's where I need to act. That's where I need to apply those four cardinal principles. Then there's the rest, the stuff that I cannot change. And that's outside my control. And I need to very clearly recognize it's outside my control and not judge myself by what is outside my control. So the Stoics give this beautiful example, which is the example of an archer. So if I'm an archer and I'm going to shoot at a target, now, what is under my control? What are the things that I can change? Well, I can practice. I can practice as much as I can. I can practice mindfully. I can practice looking at every part and thinking about it. So that's the first thing. Second thing under my control is I can choose the very best bow with the very best string and the very best arrows, so my materials, and I can look after them and keep them beautifully honed and keep them just right. Then when it's my time to actually shoot the arrow, What I have control over is how I stand, my state of mind, the steps that I go through, how I hold the bow, how I sight along the arrow, how I pull the bow back. And then as I let go of the arrow, what I control is gone. Everything that happens beyond that is no longer in my control. I could have done everything perfectly, and as the arrow took off, a bird flew into it, or a gust of wind pushed it across, or the target suddenly moved. So those things aren't under my control. And so what people, how they lose sight of this, because this is why this is so good, is that you say, well, did I hit the center of the target? Oh, I missed it. Oh no, come on, I must try harder, or something. Or if I'm a hunter, did I actually hit my target who was already moving, and so that I can get a meal? If I miss, the clear thing that what the Stoic says is, if everything that you did was as good as you could have done, then you have done well. Do not think that the end, so sort out what the end is. If the end is, yes, I prepared myself as best as I can, that's good. I keep doing that. If the end is, oh, I hit the target or I missed the target, and you berate yourself for that, and your self-esteem is all tied up with something you have no control over, you are then beating yourself up for absolutely no reason. And so this becomes terribly important. And you can see with the archer, it can be subtle. And for all of us in every one of our endeavors, it's very important to work out what is your circle of influence, to do everything you can within that, live by those precepts. Anything beyond that, if it doesn't go the way you go, then what the Stoics, they have a beautiful phrase, which is amor fati, which is Latin for love fate. So if you didn't hit the target, well, you didn't have control over that last bit. Fate has decreed that you are not going to hit the target. Now, you could be all sad and get angry at it and shake your fist at fate. How does that help you? It doesn't help you. So once you've worked out that, in fact, that wasn't in your control and stuff goes against you, then what they say is that instead of berating or hating or getting cross or fearing or whatever it is, you love it, because fate is there to teach you a lesson. There's a lesson to be learned. And that lesson doesn't make me the lesser. It says, I say, thank you, fate, for teaching me this lesson. And what that does, amor fati, love fate, love the lessons where stuff doesn't go as well as you think, it lifts a whole weight off us, because as long as you've applied very carefully your attention to the things that are in my circle, and I'm doing those according to those cardinal virtues, not from the outside, but from the inside. If it doesn't go my way and I never had control over it, I have a lesson. And it is so freeing. I cannot tell you how freeing it is. So that's the first really helpful hint that the Stoics make. The Stoic statement is, and I think this came from Marcus Aurelius, where he said, everything is fuel for your fire. So if something goes wrong, see it as fuel to help you to feed your fire so that you can become even better. And just lifts the weight of expectation, of unrealistic expectation off you at all stages, Now, the next thing that the Stoics strongly suggest, which is, as with a lot of Stoic philosophy, seems in the beginning kind of counterintuitive. You'd think, oh, God, well, how's that going to help me? Turns out to help you hugely. And what they suggest is that when you have some choices, say you think, I really like that girl and I'd like to ask her out, or I think I'm a good worker and I want to go and ask my boss for a raise, and then you feel this, oh my God, and of course it's what your brain is saying is, oh my God, what happens if it doesn't go well? And I've just given two, but there are literally thousands and thousands of times where you make a plan and you want to do something that you really want to do, but this feeling comes up, and the question is, what would happen if I go wrong, if things go wrong? And what the Stoics say is, now is the time for you to sit down and incredibly clearly look at the worst case scenario. What would happen if I asked her to go out and she laughed at me and said, you're just useless and I wouldn't waste time of day with you, and she made you feel terrible and all her friends laughed at you, and oh my God, how would that be? So if you sat down and or your boss said, get out and you've lost your job, or whatever, any of these. So you sit down and you imagine in incredible detail with technicolor and three-part harmony and everything, like the very worst thing that could happen to you. Once you've done that, a strange thing happens, because as you do it and as you imagine the absolute worst, and you think, how can I feel? As you do that, you are removing the floating anxiety and fear, which is so much greater. There's nothing to fear more than fear itself. And as you start to make it concrete, and that is the absolute worst that can happen. Will I die? No. Will I be able to face another day? Yes. Yep, okay. So that's the absolute worst thing that could happen. Once you do that, it actually frees you, because then you use the part of your mind which is completely logical, and you say, that is only one scenario. It's the worst thing that could happen. Life would move on after it. Yep, okay. So let's, and it gives you the space to move forward. So that's the second. You look at what can you change, and then as you approach something that is going to create anxiety in you and may create fear and other negative emotions, such that you won't do what you know you should do, you imagine that worst case scenario. And then the last is the way to make that worst case scenario even easier. And that is two words: memento mori, which is to remember you will die. And no matter how rich or powerful or beautiful or handsome or strong or whatever we are, we're all going to die. And in death, everyone will be equal. And not only will everybody be equal, but it puts into perspective that worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is, as compared with death, it's not that bad, really. It's not that bad. Oh, it's not that bad. So memento mori, when you apply, which is the last, so there are only 3 extra things beyond the 4 cardinal virtues. Work out what you can change. Don't beat yourself up about the things you can't change. If you feel fear and anxiety, resistance, oh my God, I can't do that, then imagine the worst case scenario, apply to that scenario memento mori, which puts it into a proper perspective. And then you find that you're free to act. How do you act? You act according to those 4 cardinal virtues. You act so that every action you do is to the greater good of humanity, so that the act is just, and that you have a proper temperance for it. You do it just enough, not too much, not too little. And you dig deep into the courage that is living in all of us, so that you will do these things. So practicing this, I mean, this isn't, you can hear, this isn't like really highfalutin stuff. This is very, very practical, very, once you get it into your mind and you start to do it, then suddenly the whole, for me, I haven't been angry at myself. I've certainly done a number of silly things, but I haven't been angry at myself once since I really started practicing this every day. So 3 or 4 weeks of practicing Stoic philosophy has improved my life, despite the fact that we're in lockdown, despite the fact that that I have this, this thing that I cannot see, which may kill me and my loved ones. Despite all that, I am feeling calmer and I'm feeling happier. And I know that if I continue to practice the Stoic philosophy, the rest of my life will be incredibly enriched by it. So that's why I want to share it with you. And if you take mine as a base, if you've never heard, there are some wonderful resources which we'll put down at the bottom. And I strongly recommend you to take this into your life, enrich your life immeasurably. Thank you.